Chapter 1 of the Sign of the Cross in the 19th Century. Recording by Dom Noah Morbake. The Sign of the Cross in the 19th Century by John GAUME. Translated by a daughter of Saint Joseph. Dedication to the glorious Saint Joseph. O blessed Father Saint Joseph, guardian of the incarnate Word, spouse of the Immaculate Mother of God, and patron of the Universal Church, with sentiments of the deepest love and gratitude, I dedicate to thee this work, destined, I hope, to enkindle in many hearts devotion to the cross of Jesus, the shadow of which brooded so heavily, yet withal so gloriously, over thy life in Bethlehem, Egypt, and Nazareth. Deign, O holy patron, to accept and bless it, that through thy intercession it may become to many the channel of the graces promised herein. By the memory of the agony thou didst undergo during the 3 days' loss, I beseech thee to take pity on those myriads of souls who have wilfully lost their God, have separated themselves from him and his church, and rushed blindly to destruction, ignorant or unmindful of their loss. Thou art, according to Saint Teresa, the minister plenipotentiary, the treasurer general of the Most High. Open then those heavenly treasures, shed them on the children of the Church committed to thy care, and grant that by means of the sign of the cross we may pass through life untainted by the vice and infidelity of the world. Let us not glory save in the cross of our Lord Jesus Christ, the instrument of our redemption, the pledge of our eternal salvation. The Translator. Feast of the Presentation of Our Lady, November 21st, 1872. Preface to the second edition. One word on the publication of this little work and the unexpected success it has obtained. How did the idea of this book occur to us? Who arranged the unforeseen circumstances to which it owes its origin? Why does a work, destined to reawaken the faith of the Catholic world in the sign of the cross, appear at this time, and not 2 or 3 centuries ago? Why is it that until now no pope thought of attaching a spiritual favor to that formula, the most venerable, most ancient, and most customary of our religion? How is it that amidst so many solicitudes, Pius IX has deigned to listen to our feeble voice, and hasten to admonish the Christians of our day to have recourse as frequently as possible to the sign of the cross, conformably to the example of their primitive ancestors? Why, in order to encourage them, has he enriched its use with an indulgence doubly precious? To all these questions we knew not, at first, what to reply, but now the light is made. All comes to the point in the Church, for divine providence never gropes in the dark, accustomed as it is to that which is not, to confound that which is. It shows itself no less admirable in small things than in great. The sign of the cross is, then, the arm of the power against the demon. Instructed by the apostles themselves, the early Christians knew it. In continual warfare with Satan, in all the power of his reign, and the cruelty of his rage, the regulator of morals, ideas, arts, theaters, festivals, and laws, the master of altars and thrones, sullying all, and making of all an instrument of corruption, they had incessant recourse to this infallible means of dispelling the fascinating charm, and warding off the fiery darts of the enemy. Hence, the continual sign of the cross became for them an exorcism of every moment. If, then, there appears now, without any premeditated design on the part of the author, a work designed to make the Christians of our days retake the victorious weapon of their ancestors, if, notwithstanding so many adverse circumstances, this work spreads so rapidly, if it wins, even in Rome itself, the most august and precious of all suffrages, if, in fine, after 18 centuries, the Vicar of Jesus Christ, the chief of eternal combat, by a solemn act urges the Catholic world to have recourse incessantly to this sign, so victorious over paganism, is it not reasonable to conclude that we find ourselves, in many respects, in a position analogous to that of the primitive Christians? If they were confronted with Satan, the king and god of that age, if they lived in the midst of a world that was not Christian, that wished not to become such, that wished no one to be such, that persecuted those who continued to be such? Are not we confronted with Satan, who, unchained on earth, is inciting nations to rebel against Jesus Christ, and making them cry out incessantly, "We will not have him reign any longer over us"? And amidst what do the Christians of our day live? Are they not surrounded by a world that is ceasing to be Christian, that does not wish to return to Christianity, that does not wish others to belong to it, that persecutes in every possible way those who persist in doing so? Cunning, violence, calumnies, injury, blasphemy, sarcasm, exploitation, exile, death itself, are not all employed against the children as they were against the fathers? Arts, theaters, books, feasts, laws, sciences, are they not now, as formerly, employed as weapons against Christianity? Is it, then, astonishing that the Sentinel of Israel, the sovereign pontiff, has come, by an act unknown in his predecessors, to reawaken the faith of Christians by this sign, the protector of the Church and of society? The analogy is so striking that Protestants themselves are amazed at it. In their view, as in ours, there is no salvation for the present world but in the cross. In the beginning of an October Prussian journal, the Gazette of the Cross published a long article entitled, "By this sign thou shalt conquer, in hoc signo vinces." Today, said the Protestant writer, we are engaged in spiritual warfare, with the same anti-Christianism which Constantine of old vanquished with the material sword. Doubtless we should say again, "Thou shalt conquer by this sign, in hoc signo vinces." The hidden and cruel powers of darkness rise to assault that crown, by the grace of God, the key of the arch of the social Christian order. Must not then the evil and the remedy be equally incontestable, when we see those same Protestants who formerly repudiated the sign of the cross as an act of idolatry, proclaiming the necessity of having recourse to it in these days, as a weapon, indispensable to us, if we wish to conquer the hidden and cruel powers whose triumph would be that of barbarism? The appearance in some manner providential of the sign of the cross in the 19th century alone explains the rapid success which it has obtained. The first French edition was sold in a few months. 3 translations of it have been made into different European languages, one in Rome, one in Turin, and one in Germany. Catholic papers have vied with one another in recommending its perusal, and many letters have been sent to us, bearing the congratulations of the most respectable men of France and foreign countries. Soli Deo honor et gloria. To God alone be honor and glory. All agree to show the fitness of our humble work, and to enhance the greatness of pontifical grace, which is the eternal result of it. Let us quote only a few lines, begging those who wrote them to receive the expressions of our sincere gratitude. The learned Neapolitan review, Scienza Fede, concludes its long analysis by saying, "What profit will our society immersed in materialism exclaim? What profit can humanity draw from this new work of Monsignor GAUME? Will it give help to the poor laboring classes, whom the revolution has deprived of work? Will it enroll volunteers for Poland? Will it exterminate the brigandage which is desolating Italy? It will do more than all this. It will give the bread of faith to those in want of it. It will enroll the Christians of the 19th century under the standard of the cross, in the furious war which they have to sustain against this infernal brigand, under this divine standard which has saved the world and which alone can again preserve it. Whatever the future may be, it will teach them how to be noble victors or noble victims. In hoc vinci." Overjoyed at seeing an indulgence attached to the sign of the cross, the venerable dean of the Catholic chair writes, "An indulgence granted to the sign of the cross at your request. What will so many persons, whom I do not wish to name, say? The Holy Father has repaid with usury the pains you have taken in order to stop the paganism which invades us. By you and through you, the whole church receives the signal favor of an indulgence, extensive as the universe and durable as ages, which shall fall at every hour, at every second, as a refreshing dew upon the souls in purgatory. How many blessings will those souls call down upon you? And if, at the time of your death, you be called on to pay them a short visit, what a reception will there await you! Let us pass to other testimonies, and come to those which have emanated from Rome. The commission charged with the care of the legionary schools has thought it necessary to address the following circular to those who direct them. Among many books, useless and dangerous, particularly for youth, there are not wanting some that are useful, and well calculated to spread in the souls of youth the beautiful maxims of our august religion, and the love of its holy practices. One of those works is unquestionably the lately published by Tiberine entitled The Sign of the Cross in the 19th Century, which has been highly eulogized by many Catholic journals. The undersigned, while strongly recommending teachers not to permit in their schools any work not approved by the Commission, equally recommends them to cause the aforesaid work to be bought and read by their pupils. They may also use it as a premium at the annual distributions which they are accustomed to have in their respective schools. Rome, from the office of the Secretary of the Commission, L. Pirano, Deputy. End of preface to the second edition. Letter of His Eminence Cardinal Altare, Prefect to the Sacred Congregation of the Index, to Monsignor Gaume, Prothonotary Apostolic. Rome, August 7th, 1863. Most illustrious Lord, by the publication of your admirable work, The Sign of the Cross, you have rendered a new and signal service to the cause of the Church of Jesus Christ. In effect, you have made known to the faithful in the most attractive manner all that is clearly contained, all that is taught, all that is operated in a most sublime manner of what is holy, divine, and consequently sovereignly useful to souls in this sacred formula, as ancient as the Church herself. The august chief of this same Church, the Vicar of Christ, the sovereign pontiff, could not but receive most joyfully a work so precious and useful to Christian people. Therefore, not only did he express his great satisfaction when I gave into his sacred hands the copy you hastened to offer him by my means, but he has, moreover, been pleased to grant with kindness the desire you expressed of seeing the practice of the sign of the cross enriched with an indulgence, thereby to incite them to make use of it for the defense of their souls without any human respect, and as frequently as possible. In the following brief, you will see how bountiful the Holy Father has shown himself by the concession of such a grace, and how much it will cause its value to be appreciated. It is highly important that this new favor of the supreme dispenser of heavenly treasures, granted for the advantage of the Church militant, be universally known, at the same time that your excellent book shall be more widely spread and better appreciated. In the Italian translation made of it by the incomparable Angel of Aquila will be found the brief, and it ought to be inserted in the new editions, which certainly cannot fail to succeed each other. In this manner shall be filled the void which you have signalized in the Raccolta delle Indulgenze. Thus your Excellency shall receive the worthy recompense, and certainly that most desired by your heart, in seeing the treasures of redemption open for the good of souls still living on earth, or already descended into purgatory, by the effects of the work you have composed, with a view to draw the attention of everyone to the first sign of the worship which all should render to the principal instrument of our redemption. Receive the expression of the sincere and high esteem with which I am, most illustrious Lord, your affectionate servants, L. Cardinal Altere. Brief of His Holiness Pius IX, Pope, for eternal remembrance. Being fully certain that the salutary mystery of the redemption and the divine virtue are contained in the sign of the cross of our Lord Jesus Christ. The faithful of the primitive church made the most frequent use of this sign, as we learn from the most ancient and notable monuments. It was even by this sign that they began all their actions. Quote, "At all our steps, all our motions, our incomings and outgoings, lighting the lamps, sitting down to table, taking a seat, whatever we do, or whithersoever we go, we mark our foreheads with the sign of the cross," end quote, says Tertullian. Considering these things, we have judged proper to reawaken the piety of the faithful towards the salutary sign of our redemption, by opening the heavenly treasures, in order that, imitating the beautiful example of early Christians, they may not blush at making frequently, openly, and publicly the sign of the cross, which is the standard of the Christian militia. Therefore, confiding in the mercy of Almighty God, and in the authority of his blessed apostles Peter and Paul, we grant, in the accustomed manner of the Church, to all and every one of the faithful of both sexes, every time that, at least, contrite in heart, and adding the invocation of the blessed Trinity, they make the sign of the cross, 50 days' indulgence for the penances which would have been imposed, or that should do for any reason whatever, we moreover grant mercifully in the Lord, that these indulgences may be applied, in the way of suffrage, to the souls who have departed this life in the grace of God. Notwithstanding all things to the contrary, these presents shall be given in perpetuity. It is also our will that the same credit be given to any written or printed copy of these presents, signed by a public notary, having the seal of an ecclesiastical dignitary, as would be given to these presents themselves, if they were shown or exhibited. Also that a copy of these letters be taken to the office of the Secretary of the Sacred Congregation of Indulgences and Holy Relics, under pain of nullity, conformable to the decree of the said congregation, dated January 19th, 1756, approved by our predecessor of holy memory, Pope Benedict XIV, the 28th of the same month in the same year, given at Rome at St. Peter's under the Ring of the Fishermen, the 28th of July, 1863, the 18th of our pontificate. Cardinal Paracini Claleri. These present apostolic letters, in the form of a brief dated July 28, 1863, were presented at the office of the Secretary of the Sacred Congregation of Indulgences on the 4th of August of the same year, conformably to the decree of the same Sacred Congregation, under date of the 14th of April, 1856, in testimony of which given in Rome at the same office, the day and year, as mentioned above. Archbishop Prinzivali. End of the brief of His Holiness, Pope Pius IX. Preface to the first edition. In the month of November of the great year 1862, a young German Catholic of great distinction arrived in Paris to pursue his course in the College of France, faithful, according to the traditional usage of his country, to make the sign of the cross before and after meals. He, on the first day, became the wonder of his school companions. The next day, in virtue of the freedom of worship, he was the object of their mockeries. In one of his visits, he begged us to tell him what we thought of the practice, of which his companions were trying to make him ashamed, and of the sign of the cross in general. The following letters are intended as an answer to those two questions. End of preface to the first edition. The sign of the cross in the 19th century. First letter. State of the question. The present world does not make the sign of the cross, or makes it seldom, or makes it badly. The primitive Christians made it. They made it frequently. They made it well. We are right, and they were wrong. Or, we are wrong, and they were right. Which is true? Paris, November 25th, 1862. My dear Frederick, scarcely 15 days have elapsed since the newspapers announced the shipwreck of Captain Walker. This account, which we read together, was so much more sorrowful, as by it we learned the death of many of the passengers with whom we were acquainted. The vessel had struck upon a rock, the waves rushed in through the breach. Notwithstanding the efforts of the sailors, it was impossible to close it. In less than an hour the hold was flooded. The ship visibly sank below the waterline. In the hope of saving it, they began to throw all the merchandise into the sea. After the merchandise, the munitions of war, the furniture, and part of the rigging. Then followed the provisions, excepting 2 or 3 casks of water and a few bags of biscuits. All was useless. The vessels continued to sink, and its total wreck became imminent. As the last resource, Walker ordered the lifeboats to be lowered. Everyone rushed into them. Unfortunately, the greater number, instead of safety, found there a watery grave. With a few variations, this is, as you know, the history of every great shipwreck. The unfortunate men who, in such an extremity, command the vessel, are perfectly excusable in casting into the sea everything that they can make away with. Life before everything. The world of our day, the world which still calls itself Christians, and to which, no doubt, your young companions belong, presents more than one point of resemblance to a vessel damaged and about to perish. The furious tempests, which for a long time have incessantly beaten upon the vessel of the Church, have made large breaches in it, through which have entered many waves of anti-Christian doctrines, morals, customs, and tendencies. Woe, not to the vessel, which is imperishable, but to the passengers, who are not so. What has it done? I speak not of the world openly pagan. Its shipwreck is consummated. I speak of the world which still pretends to be Christian. What has it done? What does it continue to do every day with the munitions of war and the provisions of life, with the merchandise, furniture, and rigging with which the Church had supplied the vessel, that, notwithstanding the dangers of rocks and tempests, it might be assured of a successful voyage into the port of eternity? It has thrown them all, or nearly all, into the sea. Where are the prayers that were formerly said in common in families? In the sea. Pious reading and meditation? In the sea. The blessing at meals? In the sea. The habit of assisting daily at the holy sacrifice? The use of the scapular and the beads? In the sea. The serious sanctification of the Sunday, by assisting at all the offices and instructions, by visiting the poor, the sick, and the afflicted? In the sea. The regular reception of the holy sacraments, the obedience to the laws of fast and abstinence? In the sea. The spirit of simplicity, of mortification, of modesty in dress, amusement, furniture, food, and lodging? Where are the crucifix, holy images, holy water, and apartments? In the sea, all in the sea. And the vessel still continues to sink. The Christian spirit is diminishing. The contrary spirit is increasing. They cast themselves into skiffs, that is to say, into some kind of religion, which they make to suit their age, position, temperament, and taste, and they live in this way, assisting at a low mass on Sunday, and how? At high mass 3 or 4 times a year, at vespers, never. Frequenting theaters and balls, reading everything that falls in their way, refusing themselves nothing but what they cannot get. Behold the frail skiffs to which they entrust their salvation. Can we be amazed at so many shipwrecks? Poor passengers, separated from the vessel, how much you are to be pitied! How much more to be pitied in the rising generation! Among the Catholic customs so imprudently abandoned by the present world is one, precious among all others, which I would wish, at every hazard, to save from shipwreck. It is that which your companions despise, without being aware of it. I mean the sign of the cross. It is time to provide for its preservation. Yet a little while, and it shall have met the fate of so many other traditional practices, which we owe to the maternal solicitude of the Church, and to the intelligent piety of Christian ages. Would you wish to know, dear Frederick, what is now the sign of the cross with those who pretended to be Christians? Place yourself on a Sunday at the door of a large church. Look at the crowd that enters the house of God. A great number advance haughtily or foolishly, it is all the same, into the holy place, without even casting a glance at the holy water font, and without making the sign of the cross. As great a number pretend to take or receive holy water and make the sign of the cross. You will see them dip their gloved hand into the holy water font, a thing as much against the liturgy as to go to confession or Holy Communion with gloves on. As to their manner of making the sign of the cross, it would be better to say nothing about it. It is capable of puzzling the most learned explainer of hieroglyphics. A motion of the hand, careless, hurried, mechanical, and imperfect, to which it is impossible to assign a form, or give it a signification, unless that the actors themselves do not attach the least importance to what they do. Behold their sign of the cross every Sunday. Among that crowd of Christians you will scarcely meet any who make this venerable sign of salvation carefully, correctly, and religiously. If, then, in a public place and under such solemn circumstances, the greater number of persons do not make the sign of the cross, or make it badly, I can scarcely persuade myself that they make it, and make it well, in other cases, where they are apparently fewer motives to do so. It is, then, an indisputable fact that the Christians of our day do not make the sign of the cross, or make it but seldom, and very carelessly. In this point, as in so many others, we are diametrically opposed to our ancestors, the Christians of the primitive church. They made the sign of the cross. They made it well. They made it very often. In the East as well as in the West, in Jerusalem, in Athens, and in Rome, the old and the young, the rich and the poor, priests and laymen, all classes of society, religiously observe this traditional custom. History affirms nothing more strongly. All the fathers of the Church who were eyewitnesses assert it. All historians prove it. Nothing would be easier than to cite their words. You will find them in the work De Cruce by your learned countryman Gretzer. In the name of all, hear the words of Tertullian. Quote, at every motion and every step, entering in or going out, when dressing, bathing, going to meals, lighting the lamps, sleeping or sitting, whatever we do or whither we go, we mark our foreheads with the sign of the cross. End quote. Footnote for sleeping, with hands crossed on the breast. End of footnote. From this we are to understand that at every moment our ancestors made the sign of the cross in one way or another, that they made it not only on the forehead, but also on the eyes, mouth, and breast. Hence it follows that if the first Christians were to reappear in our houses or public places and do today what they did 18 centuries ago, we should be tempted to regard them as lunatics. So true it is that in the use of the sign of the cross, we are directly opposed to them. They were wrong and we are right, or they were right and we are wrong. Either the one or the other. There is no medium. Which is true? Such is the question. It is grave, very grave, much more so than your companions and those like them think. I hope to convince you of this in my succeeding letters. End of the first letter.